Jerusalem, September 8, 2025. A deadly shooting at a bus stop in Israeli-annexed East Jerusalem shook the city on Sunday, claiming the lives of 5 people and leaving several others wounded. Within hours, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the scene, flanked by heavy security and accompanied by National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir. Cameras captured the two standing shoulder to shoulder, surrounded by armed guards and press, as the Prime Minister delivered one of his most forceful messages in recent months. The location was tense. Families mourned, ambulances still moved in and out of the area, and investigators continued combing through the site of the attack. The shock was still fresh, but Netanyahu wasted no time in signalling how his government would respond. Standing before reporters, his tone was unyielding. Benjamin Netanyahu declared, "We are now in pursuit, surrounding the villages from which the murderers came from, and we will get to everyone who assisted them and everyone who sent them, and we will act with even harsher measures." His words reflected both anger and resolve. The statement was not just a condemnation of the attack, but a broader message of escalation, signaling intensified military operations and stricter counter-terror measures across multiple fronts. The attack in Jerusalem was part of a broader wave of violence that has gripped the region for months. While Israel's military campaigns in Gaza dominate headlines, tensions in the West Bank, Lebanon, and even with Yemen's Houthi rebels have been steadily rising. Netanyahu made it clear that his government would not treat this attack as an isolated incident. He stressed that Israel was confronting a coordinated effort against it, linking the violence in Jerusalem to wider regional threats. Netanyahu stated firmly, "These murders, these attacks on all fronts do not deter us. They only increase our determination to complete the missions we have taken upon ourselves in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, everywhere." By invoking Gaza, Judea and Samaria, the biblical term often used by Israeli leaders for the West Bank and the broader regional battlefield, Netanyahu placed the Jerusalem shooting within the same framework as Israel's conflicts with Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran's proxies across the Middle East. His words carried a deliberate strategic message. Israel sees itself fighting a multi-front war in which every attack, whether in Jerusalem or on the border, is connected. As Netanyahu continued, his message expanded further, directly pointing to Iran as the main backer of the militant groups Israel faces. He stressed that this was not simply about sporadic attacks by Palestinians, but part of a much larger confrontation. The Prime Minister declared, "We are fighting against terrorism, against the Houthi terror regime, against Iran, which backs them all, in Gaza, in Lebanon, against Hezbollah, on all fronts. We are not relenting, and we will not relent. We will intensify our operations, and we will achieve all our objectives." This was perhaps the most significant moment of his appearance. The Prime Minister's framing placed the Jerusalem attack squarely within Israel's regional struggle against Iranian influence, suggesting that Tehran's hand can be found not only in Gaza or Lebanon, but even in the violence inside Jerusalem. His emphasis on all fronts underscored that Israel is preparing for extended conflict across multiple theatres simultaneously. The images captured at the site spoke volumes. Netanyahu, dressed in dark attire, stood alongside National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir, a far-right politician known for his uncompromising stances on Palestinians. Both men were surrounded by layers of armed guards, their presence carefully choreographed for the cameras. The visual was unmistakable. The Israeli leadership wanted to project unity, toughness and determination at a moment of national grief and anger. The juxtaposition of grief in the background, families grieving, emergency workers still on duty, with the stern, forward-looking declarations by Netanyahu, served to cement his role as the face of Israel's resilience and retaliation. The Jerusalem shooting itself was swift and brutal. Palestinian gunmen reportedly opened fire on civilians waiting at a bus stop, an attack that unfolded in seconds but left deep scars on the city. The gunmen fled the scene, sparking an intensive manhunt by Israeli security forces. Netanyahu, in his remarks, made clear that the pursuit would be relentless. Security officials later confirmed that military operations were already underway in the surrounding villages suspected of harbouring the attackers or their supporters. Netanyahu's words about harsher measures were understood to mean expanded raids, mass arrests, and potentially even the use of heavier military force in the West Bank. The attack in East Jerusalem came as Israel's war in Gaza entered a particularly bloody phase. For weeks, the Israeli military has been carrying out operations aimed at dismantling Hamas's infrastructure and weakening its capacity to fire rockets into Israeli territory. Civilian casualties in Gaza have mounted, sparking international criticism and concern from humanitarian organizations. Netanyahu's message, however, was clear. Israel would not be deterred by international pressure or by attacks on its own soil. His reference to Gaza during the Jerusalem remarks was deliberate. By drawing a straight line between the violence at a bus stop and the broader campaign in Gaza, he positioned the war as a single, interconnected struggle. The Prime Minister's explicit mention of Hezbollah reflected growing concerns about the northern border. Tensions with Lebanon's Hezbollah have escalated in recent months, with sporadic exchanges of fire threatening to develop into a wider confrontation. Netanyahu's statement that Israel was fighting in Gaza, in Lebanon, against Hezbollah on all fronts left little doubt that his government is bracing for a potential escalation in the north. Military analysts suggest that the government is sending a signal not only to its own citizens, but also to Hezbollah's leadership and its Iranian backers. Any attempt to take advantage of the situation in Gaza or the West Bank will be met with intensified Israeli military action. Netanyahu's appearance at the Jerusalem attack site was not only a security message, but also a political act. Facing criticism from opposition parties and protests over his government's handling of the ongoing conflict, the Prime Minister sought to reinforce his image as a strong leader capable of defending Israel on multiple fronts. His decision to appear alongside Ben Gvir was particularly notable. The National Security Minister has been one of the most polarizing figures in Israeli politics, often accused of inflaming tensions with his hardline rhetoric. By placing him visibly at Netanyahu's side, the Prime Minister seemed to signal unity within the government, despite internal divisions and public criticism. The international community reacted swiftly to the Jerusalem attack. Western allies expressed solidarity with Israel while urging restraint to avoid further escalation. Human rights organizations, meanwhile, raised concerns about Netanyahu's pledge of harsher measures, warning that such actions could deepen the cycle of violence and fuel further unrest in the occupied territories. Diplomatic sources suggested that Netanyahu's broader framing of the conflict, directly linking Iran, the Huthis, Hezbollah and Palestinian militants, may complicate efforts by international mediators to de-escalate the situation. His language signaled that Israel views the war not as a series of isolated incidents, but as a regional confrontation in which compromise is unlikely. For ordinary Israelis, the attack in Jerusalem was another painful reminder of the fragile security situation across the country. The sight of civilians gunned down while waiting for public transport in the nation's capital brought back memories of earlier waves of violence. Public opinion surveys taken in the aftermath suggested widespread support for Netanyahu's tough stance, though concerns remain about the long-term costs of a multi-front war. For many, the question is not whether Israel can respond forcefully, but whether the cycle of attacks and retaliations can ever truly be broken. As Netanyahu left the site of the Jerusalem shooting, his message was unmistakable. Israel, under his leadership, will not ease pressure, but instead escalate operations in response to each new attack. His words, "We will intensify our operations and we will achieve all our objectives," summed up both the resolve of his government and the grim reality of a conflict that shows no signs of ending. In the days ahead, Israeli forces are expected to expand operations across the West Bank, continue heavy strikes in Gaza, and maintain readiness along the Lebanese border. For Netanyahu, the attack in Jerusalem was not just a tragedy, but also a moment to reaffirm Israel's determination to confront its enemies on every front. Whether this strategy will restore security or deepen the cycle of violence remains uncertain. What is clear is that for now, the Prime Minister has chosen escalation over restraint, a path that could shape the region's future for months, if not years, to come. We are now in pursuit surrounding the villages from which the murderers came from, and we will get to everyone who assisted them and everyone who sent them, and we will act with even harsher measures. These murders, these attacks on all fronts do not deter us. They only increase our determination to complete the missions we have taken upon ourselves in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, everywhere. We are fighting against terrorism, against the Houthi terror regime, against Iran, which backs them all, in Gaza, in Lebanon, against Hezbollah, on all fronts. We are not relenting, and we will not relent. We will intensify our operations, and we will achieve all our objectives.
יהיה לכם יותר קל, לכו בבקשה אחורה.
חבר'ה, לא רואים את ראש הממשלה. סמפכ"ל. חבר'ה, שוטרים, מי שיש מאחור היועצים, זוזו אחורה, אני אתחיל להזיז אתכם.
אנחנו עכשיו במרדף וקיטור של הכפרים שמהם באו המרצחים, ואנחנו נשיג את כל מי שסייע באדם, כל מי ששילח אותם, ואנחנו ננקוט בצעדים קשים עוד יותר. הרציחות הללו, הפיגועים הללו, בכל הגזרות, הם לא מרפים את ידינו. הם רק מגדילים את הנחישות שלנו, להשלים את המשימות שלקחנו על עצמנו. גם בעזה, גם ביהודה ושומרון, בכל מקום. אנחנו נלחמים בטרור, במשטר הטרור של החות'ים, באיראן שמגבה את כולם, בעזה, בלבנון, בחיזבאללה, בכל הגזרות. אנחנו לא מרפים וגם לא נרפה. אנחנו נעצים את הפעולות שלנו ואנחנו נשיג את כל המטרות שלנו.